13 Questions by Man Transcending. Manhood in the Digital Age.
Welcome back to another episode of 13 Questions. This time we have Chance Garton with us for the interview. But before we get to that portion, I have with me, as always, Adam. Adam, how are you?
Phenomenal, Bill. How are you doing today?
Pretty good, especially after talking to Chance, dude. That was an amazing interview, as always.
Yeah, I feel like after this interview, you and I are on the same page more than ever before. I feel like we have become the same book.
Yeah, it was definitely like a lot of, it was cool. You guys will enjoy this one a lot. I reached out to, I found InnerVerse is also a part of InnerVerse podcast is Chance's podcast, is part of Alt Media United, which is a conglomeration. It's a completely voluntary organization that Mark Palmer Steves Jr. kind of oversees, right? So we're all kind of in this collective. 13 Questions is a part of Alt Media United. So is InnerVerse, and there's a page where you can connect to, find out all the other podcasts that are also in this kind of collective. So I reached out, found Chance and checked him out, and reached out to him, asked him to come on the show. And of course he said yes. We talk about it a little bit towards the end of the conversation, but I'm loving his Telegram community. That seems to be pretty popping. So yeah, it was a great interview. We just jumped right into the deep end, like right off the bat. So I guess I'm not even going to try to speculate or try to talk about that during the intro. We'll just save all that juicy bits for the interview section. Adam, you had a little piece of housekeeping that you wanted to address, didn't you?
Oh no, not per se housekeeping, but in relation to the guest, he just kept I don't know how to put this. It's something that he mentioned, or the way he was speaking, it reminded me and made me think very much of David Lynch and him speaking of transcendental meditation. And I keep thinking back to, he did a video. We actually did, Andreas, the previous guest that we've had on 13 Questions, came on my other podcast, Cat in the Box, and we did this deep dive. I found so many crosses and correlations into remote viewing and into transcendental meditation. But into this episode, I kept getting brought back into it, the as above, the so below, the finding yourself, going down in, and point is, I was very much reminded of this, and David Lynch has just recently came out in the news. He's doing this initiative in which they're going to be teaching transcendental meditation to people. It's a $500 million fund that is being created to do this, to teach people at colleges and university. And it is such an amazing thing to see a person like David Lynch, who speaks very highly and often of the importance of this in his way of thinking, and how it's changed his life, and he wants to bring that to other people. So yeah, I wanted to put that out there. I will definitely be finding a link and putting that into the show notes. And the same thing to link back to that podcast. If you're interested in transcendental meditation, it's something that I'm incredibly interested in, but have never found a practitioner to lead me into it. So I'm completely rambling here, but
I think that we touched on transcendental meditation in the Dean Radin interview a little bit too.
We did, and
yeah,
it seems like, hey, the truth of the world is that everything's kind of tied to some core truths in being. So transcendental meditation seems to be a way to find your true self and your true voice.
Now, isn't there some kind of like critical mass number that if a certain amount of people do this, that it will then have an effect on
globally?
And it's something to along
consensus
the lines
reality.
The square root of
prayer in groups. No. The power of 8 is more powerful than the power of 1. So there has to be thresholds. There is the 100th monkey syndrome. There are these things that propagate out. So yeah, just changing your way of thinking, and which changes your way of being, and that energy can propagate out. So I'm probably sounding like I'm speaking in certitudes here, or a word that I don't know, but certainly means something that's certain.
Well, I'm certain that you have the gratitude jingle up and ready to go. So, do you want to do that real quick before moving on?
Gratitude, 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 oh, gratitude. Gratitude, 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 oh, gratitude.
Well, Bill, are you teed up and ready to go, or would you
I-
like me to dive in?
I think I have one ready to go that kind of tied into the transcendental meditation. Actually, not only does my gratitude start with M, but you can also use it to meditate. It's Moldavite, or metaphysical properties of stones. In particular, Moldavite. I had actually mentioned Moldavite on a past episode. I think it was the Amish Phil intro, and talked about Sugalite also in that intro, but I wanted to readdress Moldavite because Ellie just made a necklace for me to wear my piece of Moldavite. So I'm thankful for that. I'm thankful for a lot of things today, actually. So you're going to get more than one, but particularly the metaphysical property of Moldavite. I have this handy dandy, the Encyclopedia of Crystals by Judy Hall book that a friend of the show, Ben Walsmith, left behind when he came to visit me for a few weeks recently. He's episode 49, if you want to check that out. But according to this encyclopedia, there's a bigger excerpt here, but I'm just going to read this little line. It says, Moldavite is a useful stone for people who find it difficult being an incarnation on Earth, and it assists in developing detachment from security issues such as money and worries for the future, providing an overview of reasons for incarnating and spiritual purposes and integrating this into earthly life. Moldavite releases fixed ideas and outworn belief systems and can neutralize hypnotic commands instilled in the past. So this ties in a lot with the interview, especially when it addresses security issues such as money or creating the future. So yeah, I'm super grateful for Moldavite, and I'm grateful for Ben for this encyclopedia, for Ellie for making me the necklace, and oh yeah, speaking of metaphysical properties of crystals and stones and whatnot, we do have an affiliate link with Metaphysical Wares, which is Derek Condit's store. Derek is on episode 50 of 13 Questions. Definitely check that out if you haven't. And if you're into stones and crystals and such, use the link on our website to get to Derek's store and buy some goodies, and you'll help support the show that way. So yeah, that's my gratitude segment. What, like, I'll stop talking now. What is your gratitude?
Mine feels decidedly different and selfishly worldly, especially after the conversations that we've had today. But in a world where I spend my mind diving and spending a lot of time on these deep questions, the as above, so below-esque questions that pretty much center around that and then branch into every aspect of life. And one of the things that I love is not distraction, but focus that can improve skill, in which that skill can be seen other places and then can affect other places of your life. And this probably isn't a good way of explaining it, but I've recently dived back into playing video games, and one very specific game, Halo Infinite. And when I was gifted this Xbox, my controls, the new system, I mean, last time I was on joystick and on just like an N64 controller, which I still have in here and play occasionally, but a single system. And when you go to having your look and movement be different, my brain was not mapped, not wired, not connected to do this well. And so I've been getting better and better and able to tweak and hone my controls in to be more sensitive and becoming to finally at the point where I'm mastering this. But what I've also seen is other aspects of my life where I challenge myself. When I'm moving around, if I'm holding a pen, I'll be throwing a pen between my hands and trying to catch it, closing my eyes, making it more challenging. And I'm finding that those little things, the motor skill of being able to do that, has improved along that same skill threshold. My typing accuracy and speed has excelled in that same direction. And I love to see this as above aspect, that this lower fine-tuning skill is impacting these other things that I do in life. And it makes me wonder and think how far those things go out. In the way of the 7 rings, the idea that to excel in one thing, you must excel in other things. And so from the very worldly aspect of challenging myself within a false reality, a world in which I'm in that same false reality with other people, but somehow that is impacting my physical ability to interface with the world around me in a more efficient way, whether that's mental, physical. I am grateful to be able to have something like that, because I ultimately I am grateful to acknowledge that, because otherwise I would not want to be spending time in that, in the time of thinking that it's completely guilty. Meaning, if I'm improving and getting better, and I'm doing this in all aspects of my life, they're all going to be reflective of one another.
Yeah,
So
it's a hologram, right? You change one aspect in the hologram, it's going to be reflected in other aspects of, the nature of the universe. But it reminds me of our last interview we had with Miguel Connor in Changing Habits. Like you're observing the process of what happens when you change one little bit of something in one spot, especially in relation to a habit, and then how is that reflected in all the other facets of your existence, right?
mm-hmm.
It's awesome. But yeah, check out the Miguel Connor episode if you haven't done that yet. And
Send in your audio, be part of the show, ask questions of your own friends. If you want to do it, ask us more. Send us your guest lists, ask us questions, add to the list. Tell us your experience. Tell us your story. You are a light into the world, and shine light upon those things that you want to see grow, because plants will not grow without that light. And that's us. That's this community. So if you have somebody in your life that you know that you want to ask these questions to, you should. And if you want to record it, then and share it, that knowledge, we should do that too.
so if you are finding value from anything that you have heard here today, please consider sharing the show with other people so that we can get the word out and reach more listeners and expand our audience. And if you would be so inclined as to donate monetarily, we do have a PayPal option on the website available for one-time donations. That is also an option for you to give back to the website, to get back to the show through the website. You'll also find all the affiliate links that we have on the website, which now, speaking of affiliates, we do have a new affiliate with Aura Cacao. So if you're a fan of cacao and doing it ceremoniously and with intention, definitely check out the episode with Jonas Ketterl. It's definitely one of my favorite ones so far. And besides that, I think that's it. And you're going to enjoy this episode.
Yes. Thank you for joining us for 13 questions. It's a really fun one.
13 questions with Chance Garton. what was the best advice ever given to you, and would you modify it at all today?
Wow. when it comes to these questions and it's like the best or the most ever, things like that, the answer might change from day to day, but I couldn't tell you exactly who gave me this advice or where I heard it. I would say it is most important in life, though, in terms of advice, to truly follow your highest excitement. And what does that actually mean? What does that look like? To me, I've kind of modified that statement for myself. And it's something you can kind of ask your body, which is that if an option is coming up and it is not a 100% hell yes, then it's actually a hell no. So that is like the metric for following your highest excitement. And you can live your life that way. You can actually follow only what is most important to you and the most fun. Really, fun is a big part of excitement, if that is a better way of putting it. So yeah, if you are able to follow the highest excitement, if you're able to say no to things that aren't 100% hell yes as much as possible, and nobody's going to be perfect about that, you can see how InnerVerse will actually modify its offerings, and your boundaries that you've set will generate an entirely different life experience for you really quickly. So if it ain't a hell yes, it's a hell no.
Do you have any like different or a favorite modality to help discern what option to take, like flipping a coin, or is like, how do you just ask your high self and wait for an answer? Like, how do you get like, what's your process, I guess is what I'm asking.
Well, I guess you could go with the old classic, if it's a multiple choice, your first answer is your best answer. That often could work. But the journey to getting more in tune with your intuition is something we are continually progressing upon. And there's never going to be like a point where necessarily you've perfected that skill. And life is always going to offer options. But another good way of looking at it is, why are you doing a thing? You doing it out of care, which is a function of love and self-love? Is it something that makes you feel like you have more possibilities, infinite possibilities? A way of thinking about it is like, if you're ever in a situation in life and you're feeling like there's only one way that you can go and you're worried or scared about any other outcome, you might want to reconsider your course, or at the very least your mindset and perspective. Because when we're operating out of love, and when we really love life and we're really in that hell yes flow state, our minds tend to give us, instead of monkey mind chatter, a stream of the infinite possibilities as options in your mind. Like, I could do this or I could do that. And you just start rapid fire in the flow state, having all kinds of ideas that are exciting. And at that point, it almost doesn't matter what you pick, because as infinite beings, we're going to get around to experiencing it all eventually. But if we're feeling really limited, if we're feeling uninspired, that comes across on the mental plane as, self-defeating chatter or restricted feelings of, I don't have options. So a good way to know if you're in a good perpetual flow state of synchronicity is to have your mind offering options and imaginative possibilities instead of feeling restricted or limited.
I like it. So what I'm gathering is, by allowing your mind to play out certain scenarios, not being restricted by limitations which you may impose on yourself, that gives you the freedom to kind of move beyond what you thought was a limitation to begin with, and kind of check that option, be able to assign a value judgment to whatever option you're considering at that time. Does that make sense?
Yeah, a simple way of putting it is that love is the force of expansion, and it's our natural state to expand. So the object of love, whatever it is that we love, and really the only love that exists is self-love, because all is self, that love state is always going to nurture the infinite possibilities in whatever it is we care about, ourself importantly, most of all. And the fear energy is the opposite. It's the restrictive, constricting force. So whenever we're in fear, we tend to collapse our potentials down to just one outcome, and that's what has to happen, or we feel like we're not going to be okay. So that's another good way of looking at it. If you are, and this definitely can apply to like relationships, which is a tricky place for it to apply, but important because it's where it's most obscured. You know, if you are like, I have to have this person or my life is ruined, that could probably indicate some sort of codependency, or at the very least that there's an attachment that needs to be released. Not necessarily that the relationship needs to end, but that reframing our perspective on it can allow for us to expand too. Because when we're in that state and like, we need this person, we need them to be this way for us to be okay. Well, we're also restricting in our mind, in our manifestation projector, the ways that that other person can express, evolve, and exist, if that makes sense. So releasing that attachment, finding a way to be, to not need, but instead just be grateful and love and allow for whatever change that needs to happen to come across without trying to control. That is generally going to be the way to go. I would say always.
That reminds me very much of hearing David Lynch talk on transcendental meditation, on the effect of after you go in, down and find yourself, that you start to see all the other connections to other people, and it changes your connection to the rest of the world once you fundamentally understand that self connection and that love of self.
Yeah, that's absolutely it. So when I say that the only kind of love is self-love, it doesn't mean that you can't act lovingly to other people. But how I consider it is that if you truly love self, like the capital S self, the imperial self, the I am that is inherent to all beings that exist and everything in every part of the universe, well, then you're also loving all of universe. But whenever you're trying to externalize love and you're putting other people or an outcome on a pedestal, and it must be that way for you to feel like you are in love or love life, that's actually where things are getting restricted. So if you have true self-love, then you will do what is necessary for yourself to take care of yourself. And then that ability to express care will apply to the world as well. So if you love yourself, then you can care about the world. I think we have mixed up in society love and care quite a bit. I mean, we're really limited by just the number of words we have for these concepts in our particular language. And when you think about anything creative, anything you want to generate in the world, any project or any invention that has ever come out into the reality, it's always occurred because there was care. What you care about gets done, and it's done well. This applies to like the myth of talent as well. Like we have aptitudes for things, for sure. There are things that we, but that has to do with if we care about it or not. Like the difference between you and your heroes, and maybe an artist, for example, a painter that you really admire their work. Instead of calling them talented and thinking to yourself, I could never do that, I don't have that talent. Instead, consider all of the dedication and time and effort that went into them developing that craft, and how that required them to really care about what they were doing in order to put in the time. And know that the difference between you and your heroes is just that they've put in the time and effort to become or to create whatever it is that you admire about their life. And see how you can apply care to something and watch it grow, and build a container for that care to be funneled and channeled into, and see how the value of that vessel grows over time, if that makes sense.
It does make sense. And I only paused there just because talking about these subjects can be so hard, but I'm glad that you brought up the I am, because I am actually reading the I am discourses that was recommended to me, to anybody who listened to the show, really, by Dr. Berlando. And that's has to do with Saint Germain and his teachings, I guess is one word for it. But he's I'm going through this book, right, and I try to read what do they call it, a discourse a day, I guess. And one of them, the one that popped out for me this morning, kind of fits. So I'm just going to read the little blurb that stuck out to me. It says, no one in the outer consciousness can possibly know what the, quote, I am God presence in the other individual wishes to do. These are vital truths that, if maintained, would bring very great peace into the lives of individuals. So with that, I guess the point of me reading that is peace and freedom as two parts of the equation to happiness, I would say. So in order to secure that peace within ourselves and for others, acknowledging the I am presence in them and finding peace in that kind of reassures us, because we know, I mean, that's the only active presence in the universe. So how can it fail, right? So, and speaking of failing, when things do fail, if in the next paragraph here, I put it down, but pick it back up real quick if I can find it. He says, because you were talking about businesses and being creative, and oh, I lost the spot. Where'd it go? Oh,
well, I like that a lot, because when he says that you can never know what the I am presence wants that's in the outer consciousness of other beings, that's perfect, because a lot of what we do and what we misconstrue as love or relationship is that we are trying to discern what the other wants, but what we're also trying to do is modify our behavior and in some way attempt to play out a control drama so that we can influence the other to want what we want them to want, which is usually what we want. But if we can release that and instead change our desire or modify our perspective so that it is in that love and an expansion state, and accept that whatever happens is what's meant to happen, and whatever they want, allow for that without needing it to be a certain particular way, and then paradoxically, we're going to get what we wanted anyway, which is love, because we're the one allowing for love to exist, in the sense that the infinite potential of the I am in the other and in the external is being honored and recognized, instead of it needing to be what we think that it needs to be, which is the fear mindset.
He's on fire! Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you hit the nail on the head, and I'm glad that, we have language to wrap our heads around it. It's because these topics are super, I mean, I find them challenging, like to talk about. I can understand them and conceptualize them, but then trying to regurgitate, I don't know, regurgitate is the right word, right? But to put thought into words is something that I maybe struggle with sometimes, especially when it comes to, logoic concepts. So, how can you talk about something that's not supposed to be talk aboutable, like ineffable, right? It's just the paradox thing. I love that you brought up paradox, because finding that paradoxes have something to do with, the nature of our reality, it seems. But yeah, question 2. What do you willfully ignore?
This is a tougher one to answer, but I think it actually ties into the first question pretty well. So I have a tendency, because of everything we just talked about in the first one, to sometimes actually not voice my preference or my boundary about things. And that can be important too. So it's all right to have preference in a sense, like, you can express what it is that feels like the most exciting option to you, or express to another being in a relationship how much they mean to you or what you hope for out of that relationship. And that can be done in a way that isn't limiting. But sometimes I have a tendency to ignore expressing those preferences because of my, on the other hand, like in terms of question 1, my intent to not limit or not pressure or not manipulate a situation or another person, So there is like a fine line and a balance, because if we're leaving things unexpressed from within ourselves, that can be its own form of constriction.
Absolutely. It is. I can relate because I mean, I'm finding it. As you can tell with this podcast, right? My throat chakra, I guess, is blocked. There's having, expressing our preferences and needs can be difficult and uncomfortable sometimes, right? So I can relate.
Yeah. So how old are you, Bill?
33.
Hey, me too.
Yeah.
Cool. Just turned 33.
Awesome.
So actually, in terms of development of your spiritual centers, the ages between 28 and 35 are about developing throat chakra. So maybe to reframe it for yourself, instead of thinking my throat chakra is blocked, because that belief actually sets up the energetic situation for it to be true. Maybe reframe it to yourself that my throat chakra is currently under renovation and development and upgrade and improvement, if that makes sense. So instead of seeing it as blocked, think like every time that you feel a little bit of friction and expression, go into that. And even if it takes time, even if it takes a moment for the expression to come through and come out, instead of thinking, oh man, I'm blocked right now, think, okay, this is a moment of I'm adding another piece to the jigsaw puzzle of the perfection of this part of my being.
Yeah, dude, that's super helpful. Absolutely. Reframing it, reauthorizing it. I should definitely focus more on that. And I didn't know the thing about the age range. So Adam, just out of curiosity, did you have any, experiences with, like, I don't know, finding your voice, I guess, between, what did you say, 28 and 33 or 35? What?
Yeah, 28 to 35.
Yeah, probably. Probably. I'd have to see when Friends to Know first aired, but yeah, there was certainly a prime time in there. I've always kind of dabbled in radio and different things, but that's really, really when I started jumping in deep. So yeah, I'd say so.
What's cool about throat chakra is it's more than just about expressing your emotions, expressing truth. It has a lot more superpowers involved in it than that, because what we can do with the voice is very tied to the logos itself. So like advanced ideas about the throat chakra that come from, say, like Peruvian shamanism, say things like that the throat chakra, once it's really fully developed or further developed, it actually has superpowers involved in it, from everything to like altering or manifesting reality in the way that is in alignment with your highest truth, as opposed to just expressing your highest truth. And even things like becoming invisible. I mean, maybe not literally, but learning how to exist and express and shine and radiate in such a way that you're not drawing a spotlight onto yourself from forces that are against your highest good. And that's a tricky dynamic to explain, but it has to do with the purity of intent in what it is that you're setting out to manifest through your logos, through your speech. And when in full alignment and with the rest of your energy centers also in strong alignment, you can do very powerful things without the resistance from, the powers that should not be. And it has to do with a good way of looking at it is you can do anything in the world that you want. You can change the world in any way that you see as best and fit, as long as you're willing to let other people take the credit.
Yeah, it's kind of, you have to assign the glory to, I don't know if that's the right terminology or not, but not to keep your I don't know, your ego in check, I guess. Because when you do manifest these things and these things do start to happen, right? Like having that, the foreknowledge to realize it's not you, right? It's the I am outside of yourself that is what is causing all the flow to be the way you want it to be, right?
The I am that is within and outside of yourself. And paradoxically, it's not really outside of yourself because all of the external is in the mental plane. The world is in your head, not literally your head, but within your consciousness. So part of that collapsing the wave particle duality thing about spirituality that is important to this journey is realizing that it's safe to assign the credit, so to speak, to God or to Source or to the Supreme Being, but not to do that in a way that limits yourself by creating a separation between yourself and Supreme Being. Instead, recognizing that Supreme Being is not a noun, it's not a character, it's not something or somebody out there. It is the I am. It is the sense of existing that permeates all of reality.
It reminds me of another part in this book. I'll just touch on briefly without reading it. Saint Germain was talking about how the O-M versus the I, or the I am, and the differences between the two. And the Om is kind of lacking the creative aspect that the I am encompasses. And if you get, I guess the way I would kind of explain it is, if you get to the end of the Om chant, you still have the M, like the Om, that tone, right? You can do all the vowels and cover all the bases, right, with the I am, and still get to the same place as you end with the Om. But you're adding in that other aspect, which is yourself, right? Where you're including yourself in the I am. So is that kind of jiving with what you were saying? Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does, because we're talking about the principle of gender now.
Hey, listen.
The Om and the I'm, they are the white and the black of the yin yang, right? You have the I and the O. The I is the pole and the O is the whole. We're talking about the generative principle here. We're talking about male and female. And so the I'm is more of the creative force, it's the yang energy. I did that. I'm doing this. The Om is like the container for that. It's like the feminine, it's the vessel, it's the womb. And realizing that whether male or female, you have both components within you. I'm Om. That's kind of the collapsing of the duality. And the M is interesting just because it's like the only, as far as I know, it's the only letter or consonant sound that you don't have to use your tongue for. Right? So it is about that spaciousness and that openness inside in the throat chakra, mouth hole area. And M is also interesting because it's the 13 in terms of gematria and letters. The 13 being the 12 of the archetypal zodiacal construct around the one, which is the sun or the self or the conscious mind or ego. So I'm Om is like saying that is helping your ego realize that it is not separate from either side of the generative principle.
And that's amazing. Like, thank you for sharing and pointing that out.
I've never thought that before, so I'm pretty glad to have come to that realization just now myself. Thank you.
Yeah, I guess Saint Germain's helping us out, right? Adam, do you have any thoughts?
No, it's just, nothing offhand.
Okay. Question number 3. What book has been most influential on your life and why?
Well, I've read a lot of books, so that's a tough question. Is it okay that 2 are coming into mind right now?
Yeah.
Okay, so one is definitely a classic for the new agers out there. Not that I self-identify as a new ager, but it's definitely part of that zeitgeist. Have you read the Celestine Prophecy?
No, but I watched the movie like 2 weeks ago, and I have the book like right below the shelf, like right here, right in front of me.
So I've never seen the movie. I can't speak on how well it captures and conveys the spirit of the book. And, the book isn't perfect. There are some cosmological things that are a bit mainstream that I don't agree with necessarily in the story, but that's forgivable because almost everything out there follows the same general cosmology handed to us by scientism to a degree. But what is really useful about that book, or what was for me in my life, and has continued to be so because it comes back around perennially at different points in my journey, is the following of synchronicity leading you to your spiritual truth and to, like, so that book has so many different insights. It's all about these 10 different insights, and it leads the reader from recognizing that everything that happens in their life is part of synchronicity to learning about building up your energy and the realization and truth that to get the synchronicities into a place of being exciting instead of kind of dark and unfortunate misfortune, bad luck. The key is to build up your personal energy, and it gives some good tools and practices and fictional but real world things that one can do to build up their energy. And once you build up your energy and hold more of that self, of that light in your vessel, then the synchronicities will flow more quickly and be more exciting and eventually lead you to what is probably the most important component of the book. And that is to remember the question. What is the question that you incarnated into this life in order to answer? And it's going to be a question that's personal and unique to you. Maybe other people are also working on that question, but it's something that no matter how far in your journey you go, you will continue to reveal more insights and more ways of looking at that personal question of why I'm here, what I'm here to solve, what I'm here to do. And that one question is expansive and infinite. When you look at everything in universe, especially if you're considering it as an electrical universe, we have this pattern of dendritic growth, like how a tree branch, it starts as just this one line and then branches come out of it and then branches come out of that. Or like the way that a pattern of lightning striking from cloud to ground has these dendritic branches, or the blood vessels in your body looks like this. It's across the board. This pattern's everywhere. And questions are like that, because if you ask a question and you look for the answer or you find an answer, that answer actually leads you to more questions. So following the questions that are most important to you and looking for answers is always going to lead you further and further infinitely, like a choose your own adventure, right? So the asking questions part of reality, instead of holding one dogma and thinking you've solved everything and that you don't need any more truth seeking or whatever. I mean, you can come to some realizations about higher truths that you accept and that they stay firmly rooted in your reality tunnel. But, you know, every question leads to an answer, which leads to new questions, which leads to an answer, which leads to new questions. And then this way, when you quest with the eye on, you are in the flow and path of continually expanding, which is what life does and what existence is about.
Yeah, I love it.
Well, also the idea that, you know, we know evolution is a thing, but people don't think that everything, including the world around you, could be on that same track of increasing in complexity. So it's a beautiful thing to see that, you know, there may not be a plateau, that you're more on the precipice.
That sounds good. Yeah. There's always more climbing to do. Life is kind of like a game of chutes and ladders. It's infinite stairs going up, and you could also ride the slide all the way down. And sometimes, paradoxically, hitting what feels like rock bottom actually punches you through to a higher level at the top. Not that you should necessarily seek rock bottom, but there are some paths out there where that seems to be the goal.
Well, rock bottom's going to give you a different angle of view that you wouldn't have before. So it's one of those, you know, as above, so belows that.
Yeah, the bottom is the top.
Yeah, exactly. You can always, your parents can teach you what to do or what not to do. And you can take the best of both situations. So, you know, it's the same flip side of the coin.
Yeah, and the whole concept reminds me of like Indra's web, that idea that really what we are as beings in consciousness are explorers of the void, that the pleroma or the all that is also a void, because in the undifferentiated state of oneness that we come from, it might as well be nothing as much as it is something, in the sense that if there is no distinction, definition, or differentiation, then there is no thing, no thingness, right? And so there's the paradox, and a big part of a spiritual path. I mean, there's many books I could talk about that have been most influential to me. Another one would be Straw Man, The True Story of Your Artificial Person by Clint Richardson, where he talks about how he talks about many things. It's a huge book, but he talks about how nouns do not exist. There's no such thing as a person, place, or a thing. And that is a very helpful conceptualization spiritually, and also as it applies to the legal realm and legal sorcery that has been keeping humanity living in the belief, the false reality of separation from nature, which is impossible. We are nature, so we're never separate from it. But if we believe that we are, if we create these separations in our mind, then we'll act as if we are. And so functionally, it is similar to being separate, even though we're not. So we're, as explorers of the void, what you said made me think about this, how, you can see other beings show you what to do or what not to do. That's kind of what the whole journey has been. Every ancestor that's ever come, and even what we're doing here, is we are spreading like that dendritic pattern across a great and infinite chasm. And our DNA is like this bridge of information that shows us what is over here or what's over there. And we're mapping out the infinite, which is a never-ending process.
Absolutely. Not too many people, I don't think, know about the Clint Richardson Strawman book. You're the only other person that I know of, I've come across to have referenced and known about this book. Like, have you read? I bought it years ago. I've never read it, I never finished it because,
it's huge.
Yeah. Did you read the whole thing?
I think I've read about 700 pages of the 11 or 1200. Wow. So I have not read it all. Although, I'll get to it eventually. It's kind of more like a Bible to study rather than something to try to sit and power through.
Yeah.
But I've had Clint on my own podcast about, 4 or 5 times.
Really?
And he's a good buddy.
Awesome.
He's a great guy.
Okay, cool. Because, I'd like to get him on 13 questions. But I didn't know that this book was still, he was still around doing stuff. So that's awesome. If
you get him on, let me know, because I'd love to check that out. I'd like to hear him talk about things outside of his normal purview of research and specific questions that are typically asked of him and subject matter for podcasts. That would be cool.
Right on. Yeah, we'll try to make that happen. And I love the whole, what you said about questing with your eye on, like that, breaking down. I'm a huge fan of breaking down words and etymology, and I never thought of question that way. So thank you for that a little bit too.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and I'll give you Clint's email if you guys want it. He's very accessible for interviews. He likes to do them.
Sure. Yeah. We'll exchange that after we get through the interview. Question number 4. What rule do you have for yourself that you never break, and why do you think that it's important?
Oh, man. I don't know if there's any rule I've ever made for myself that I didn't break at some point. So it may take me a moment to circle around to a proper answer for this, but I think that, I guess what's coming to mind, first answer is always the best, right? With multiple choice. The rule that I try not to break for myself is don't be too hard on myself mentally, because there's always going to be mistakes or missteps. There's always going to be a falling off of the wagon, metaphorically, at some point or another. Well, I say always, even that is a limiting belief, but it can happen, right? So a good rule that I like to hold for myself is that whatever outcome I generate or manifest, whatever step I take, be it a misstep or not, whenever I catch myself with that almost like demonic perspective of like, you suck, you're a piece of shit, why'd you do that, you're horrible. And I catch that in my mind. My rule is to shut that down, right? Because it's not helpful or necessary. And we're really trained to have that type of self-deprecating mental chatter and self-limiting mental chatter. So for me, it is definitely a rule for myself that I find very important not to break, to whenever anything like that comes up, to state the opposite to myself and state why that isn't true. You know, it's kind of like, I guess, practicing forgiveness in a way.
Yeah, that's something that I'm also working on, right? Is I like to think of it as using the sword, or the sword of truth, to pare away anything that is not in conformity with the I am, right? And because we are our own toughest critics, right? Being hard on ourselves. And so, yeah, trying to take that moment to remind yourself to be kind to yourself is the hardest, like one of the hardest things to do. I'm finding, right? Because being compassionate towards yourself is one of the things that Greg Braden talks about in his book, Divine Matrix. Are you familiar with Greg Braden?
I'm sure I've heard that name, but I've not really gone into his work or checked out that book.
Yeah, definitely give that a glance. So yeah, dude, I actually have a message in my phone on the lock screen. It says "Be kind to yourself," and I don't ever pay attention to it because I'm never on my lock screen, right? So maybe I should change that.
Well, what you said is great because you use the metaphor of the warrior, talking about the sword of truth to pare away the, infected branches of the tree, if you will. That's kind of what we're here to do as gardeners of this particular aspect of reality. That trees, if we're talking about the garden metaphor, they can't remove the constricting and parasitic vines and things that might start to grow on them on their own. We are able to do that. We're able to make that discernment. And that is a power of free will. You know, it comes at a cost of also having the free will power to not remove the parasitic branches or even to inflict harm purposefully. But another aspect of the metaphor for this particular idea of watching your thoughts and not allowing certain things through, or not believing or accepting certain things when they show up, would be to consider yourself like an archer on the wall, like Helm's Deep in the Two Towers, the Lord of the Rings. And each of those negative or self-limiting thoughts or hateful things that is coming at you is like an orc, and you're Legolas, and you see it and you shoot it down with an arrow of truth, which is some sort of affirmation that reminds yourself of why that ugly thing isn't really the truth, the limiting thing isn't really the truth, and that you love yourself, and that actually your potential is far greater than whatever that particular false belief would state to you.
Yeah, it's something that Dr. Baer pointed out, was that warrior archetype not only applies to, the outside manifestation, if you will, but it, going to the warrior on the inside, right? Taking responsibility and authorizing what thoughts are going to come in to your reality, because it's ultimately what you're going to manifest. And I think that's a really important archetype to keep in mind, especially when, we're talking about questions like this podcast brings up. So question 5, if I were to ask your best friend, what is the one thing they would say you need to work on the most, and why?
Yeah, I think that I can answer that one pretty easily. I have a tendency of being really busy, of creating big to-do lists in my mind. And I'm lucky to have a best friend that has a different way of looking at that stuff, who is a very, very proficient and accomplished flow stater of getting lots of stuff done in a productive way. But her way of looking at it is like options instead of must do or to-do list. This is the wheel of possibilities rather than you got to do all this stuff or you failed. So I've learned that it's really easy to configure your energy field, your energy body, into the pattern of overdoing it, of doing too much or feeling overstretched or overreached. Yet at the same time, you could do all the things that you're doing, or even more and better potentially, without having that particular stress on your energy body. And that shows up in places like the right hip or the third eye. You know, we haven't touched on this, but I am into sound healing and using tuning forks to help people balance their auric field and their chakras. And so there are certain places in the energy body where this particular like busyness thing shows up, where we feel like we're overly stressed by how busy we are. And a recent client actually like helped me learn how this dynamic applies to the third eye really well, in the sense that, you know, he's an achiever, very much a big overachiever. I say overachiever, but not in a bad way, but maybe comparatively to most people in the world and what they get done in a day. And I'm all about that go, go, go lifestyle. I have an Aries sun, so I have a lot of that do stuff energy, but it is self-sabotaging and self-defeating to feel like you are lacking or failing by not being able to fit all the things that are on that mental to-do list into one day. So where that comes across in the third eye, for example, is like if you're spending a lot of time thinking about what you need to do next and what's coming up in the future and going over that to-do list, A, you're not in the present moment, and B, you are blocking the third eye, or you're channeling all of its energy into that to-do list. Whereas if you could relax and let that go and just be in the present moment and do, you know, what is best and most exciting for you in that moment, and trust that your mind is going to remember the to-do list, or maybe externalize it into like create like a pie chart of how you would ideally maybe divide your day, or what options you have for the day, and maybe make the pie chart divided based on what is most exciting is a bigger slice of the pie chart, something like that. But where you can release and relax and let go of the feeling of like, if I don't do all this, then I failed or I lack. Because then third eye energy can go back into the imaginative aspect of what it's really meant to be doing, where then you're allowing for possibilities rather than constricting yourself down to one outcome. And that brings us back around to question one, you know, the difference between constricting yourself with fear of lack or need of something to be a certain way versus allowing yourself to be in love with the moment, which is all that is. So you're in love with the existence and not worried about if you're going to get it all done. Because at the end of the day, if you vanished off the face of the realm or died today, morbid idea, but everything that you thought needed to happen or that you must do in some way or another is going to get done, or is going to happen, or isn't, but didn't need to, wasn't vital for universe to continue existing. So tricky sometimes, especially for people that have a lot of ambition and have a lot of drive, or really know what they want in life, or have, you know, clear missions, to let go of that very stressful to-do list and just trust that you're going to do what needs to be done when you need to do it. But that is big advice for me, very important and helpful for the friend I'm thinking of to be in my life, because I get that energy from this friend without even needing to necessarily discuss it. It helps me relax and let go of that particular pattern, although it is a strong pattern for me in particular.
Yeah, I love the reframing of the to-do into options. Like just that shift in words relaxes, like takes off so much more attention, you know, because it's not like to do, you know, just the phraseology is not even the right word, right? But it's casting spells with words, and they get, you know, certain connotations entered in your brain, and it becomes something that you're obligated to do instead of options, right?
Yeah, it's like instead of to do, can do.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think of what Carl Sagan used to say: if you want to make an apple pie, you have to create a universe. Like, there's amazing things going on all around that we're part of, but we can't see the forest through the trees of where we're at and how amazing some of the things that we do on a day-to-day basis are.
I mean, that's absolutely true. Everything is everything.
Question number 6. What turns you on creatively, spiritually, or emotionally?
That is a good question. could answer it in a lot of ways, but creatively, what I really like most is complexity, I guess. I like a lot of details that make up a whole. Like my particular style as an artist is one that doesn't necessarily have like traditional skill in terms of like realism or making things look like they do in quote unquote real life, or impressions of things that other people make that are perfect and exact. I like the idea in terms of creativity that what we're putting our creative energy into in the form of time and attention, the more time and attention we can put into one particular container or vessel or an art piece, art project, the more that energy will become, will live in that vessel. And so even without necessarily having traditional skill or training in a particular artistic modality, if we come up with and devise a way to be able to spend a lot of time, attention, and addition of details and complexity into a particular vessel or a canvas or a piece of paper, that regardless of our traditional skill level or lack thereof, that particular piece of art will speak to other people. They will feel how much attention and energy and intention went into it. So like for me, I make marker doodles that sometimes take me half a year. I mean, I think the longest one ever sat, not yet completed, was over a year for me. It's a big piece of paper. I draw out all the black lines. I kind of make my own coloring book, and I try to find a way to add as much small detail across the whole page as I can. And even though I am not necessarily skilled in the traditional methods of art, I'm not painting a Mona Lisa, for example, the feeling that you get when you look at one of these pieces when it's done is like, wow, a lot went into that. A lot is there. You can't necessarily say what it is that gives you the feeling of like, that's awesome. But what is happening is that the viewer is able to sense and perceive and feel how much spiritual currency or attention went into that one piece. So all of us have this ability. It's just a matter of figuring out and coming up with a method to channel a lot of energy into one thing and give it value. And the way to do that, we really got to stop channeling attention and energy, which is our value, into things that are vampiric or a void or a hole, right? So if we think about how much time in our lives we've spent watching TV or something like that, or playing video games, those type of things, there's not really any container for our attention energy in those things. Or if there is, it's going and channeled to something else. Kind of like the idea of getting loosed. And we don't get to retain that value. So when it comes to like a canvas, though, you could have that painting 10 years from now, and when you look at it, it's actually going to have increased its value. So all the energy, all of yourself that you poured into that thing, you get to keep, and it appreciates over time because you appreciate it more over time. You look at that and you go, wow, I'm glad I made that. But you don't necessarily go look back at a TV show you watched and think 10 years later, wow, I'm glad I watched that. You're not getting that energy back. It's not retained. So for me, it's really spiritually exciting or creatively exciting when I see other people's investment into a container for their spiritual energy or currency, that they were able to lock all that energy into a thing and it appreciated and I appreciate it. And that applies to all kinds of stuff. I mean, making a podcast is like that. I think I have over 300 things on my RSS feed at this point for InnerVerse, different interviews and such, and all of them are still there. None of that spiritual currency or energy is lost over time. And I appreciate more and more that I started it when I did, because now I'm where I'm at now. And all that foundation that came before was required for me to get to the level of complexity and enjoyment that exists within this particular vessel for my attention as it is now.
Yeah, I love that you brought up podcasting, because that's exactly how I feel about 13 Questions. Is there's a vessel for not, just my spiritual, journey or whatever involvement, but it's Darren and Graham had this vision for it to be open source, and so if everybody can participate in it. So the creativity aspect that goes into collaborating, and of the behind the scenes aspects of producing and finding art and whatnot, the whole journey of what I've experienced so far has been, just amazing, because I feel like this is not just a vessel for one individual. Like, one person didn't start this, right? There's like a community that got together and decided that, hey, if we could ask these, 13 super good questions to all these interesting people that we've talked to and found out so far, like, where could we go? Like, what could we find out? So I love that you ended it with podcasting, because that's my passion too. So
Yeah, exactly. I'm glad you guys are doing it. This is a cool format.
yeah, it's just evolving as it goes too. It's ever changing, it seems.
Oh yeah, and you got to leave it room to do that and grow and evolve. Our creations teach us more than we could ever expect before the onset of the creation, right?
What do you mean?
Well, you can look at it like the way that people who have children, which is a very high level of creation, they learn from their children things that they never knew that they needed to learn. I mean, in fact, some beings come in as the child to certain parents, and they already have certain things about them that the parent needed to witness in order for them to grow and learn and evolve. Or when it comes to a project that is in the physical realm, like making a podcast or painting a painting, in order that by the end of it, we'll have learned things about ourselves or learned skills that we didn't expect or know were going to come about. So the creation itself teaches its creator more than we could ever really assess or comprehend. And I think that's part of the reason why InnerVerse, why Supreme Being creates us, why we as the created exist, is to teach the creation. And that's part of that questioning and finding answers and the new questions. We are a function of the expansive force of love, which is existence itself, which is life itself.
I mean, absolutely. And to speak on that, and just because I think the creative aspect is alive in all of us, and in order to foster that and help facilitate that, I just wanted to emphasize the open aspect portion of 13 Questions. I know we don't really facilitate it too well or talk about it too often, but I think that being able to, just for me, like being able to go on this journey and come how far I have so far, like to inspire other people to take that action themselves and to go out and do a recording, and see, within that process you're going to learn something, right? I don't know what it is, but it'll be fun, right? So I just find it it's inspired action, and creativity is something that is squelched, really, I think, squashed in modern culture, because we have these things that entertain us, right? They entertain, or entertainment, if you break that down, they enter into our minds and they contain it, and then they hold it, right? So they hold it. It's mind control, basically. And so when we're able to funnel that creativity into projects like podcasting or whatever, that's you're expressing yourself that way, and that's what we're meant to do, right? Is to create.
Yeah, no, for sure.
Question number 7. What was the most embarrassing or humbling experience of your life?
Well, this is a hard one to answer because to really be truthful, it's quite personal, but I guess I'll go ahead and explain it personally. I used to be married, right? And I was led into this relationship through what felt like synchronicity, and I followed into the same trap I think that many men do in today's world of this sort of savior complex of, I call it the Messiah-ops, because it's the Messiah psyop that is prevalent throughout the world. Maybe we could talk about that at some other point. But for me, what this looked like was sacrificing myself, what I need, what is best for me, and my energy into another person who wasn't ready for that level of dynamic, right? And so when it comes to what was embarrassing or humbling about it was that for a long time I knew that it was not for my highest good. This is not to like talk shit on this other person, but I knew that it wasn't fully right. And I kept pressing forward anyway, almost like trying to save face or prove to myself that I made the right choice, or that I didn't waste all this time, energy, and effort in a direction that was going to ultimately fail or hurt me. And so what was embarrassing or humbling about it, other than the particular details about what led to the end of it, which definitely had some embarrassment in terms of pride, was the, acceptance that I needed to make this change, that I needed to set this boundary, that what I really ought to have been doing, rather than making my life about another person, was to be following my highest purpose and doing that. And we'll talk about that more, I think, down in like question number 13. But yeah, it was embarrassing and humbling, for the world to have to see that I made this mistake, for friends and family to now feel like we have to take sides between you and them, which luckily that didn't really happen. But it can be very humbling to recognize that and make the courageous decision to have a big change in direction of life, especially when it comes to something as major as, your life partnerships.
For real, dude. I mean, I've been divorced. I don't think I've talked about it on more than my own episode, but yeah, it's just it's not a good process. It's not fun for anybody. So I can relate to you there. And yeah, I think you're absolutely right when you touched on the savior complex, like the Superman thing. I think, I don't know, with products of our environment, but growing up watching all these superheroes, right? And Marvel and whatnot, maybe that has something to do with, wanting to save everybody, save the world. I don't know.
Yeah. And it comes from in my opinion, misinterpretation of biblical New Testament stuff. The idea that the best guy ever let the crowd kill him, and that was what made him the best, was that he sacrificed himself for the collective. And it's missing a lot of key important points of that story without, digressing too far into that. When we have that type of programming, it leads to things like, everybody gets your cowpoke. Everybody get the needle because you're doing it for everybody else. Even if there's possible side effects or harm that comes to you, it's worth it because you did it for everybody else. Same exact mindset applies to communism and socialism and all kinds of things where the myth of equality is perpetuated as well. The fact is that the only equality that exists is in the eyes of nature or our creation. We're all priceless, as in there is no value assigned, because the value that we assign to things that is like monetarily construed is artificial value. It's subjective, it's relative, it's all that. And we're really priceless. We're no thing. We're not a person. we're not a noun. We're not a thing. And yeah, when we look at this whole sacrifice yourself for the collective idea and the idea of creating equality through external control, it's impossible because we all are actually quite different. And what it is that's valuable about each of us is unique and cannot necessarily be put on a comparative spectrum. So the only equality that government or in external institutions can create or ever has created is equality of misery, bringing everyone down to a lowest common denominator under the myth and the lie of a paradise and bringing everybody up to a higher level. So that is a very important realization for us to make in ourselves, that really we shouldn't be self-sacrificing in that way, because then if everybody sacrifices themselves to the collective or to another person, even if to just one other person, that's still a form of the collective, then we're all dead or we're all less because of this sacrifice. But if everybody takes care of themselves, loves themselves, then we're all taken care of and we're all loved. And then the few that may have a struggle or may actually need some kind of help or assistance will be aided by the very presence of the beings that have self-love, because containing self and love in your body vessel, in your energetic container, is like becoming a lantern that your presence shines a light there for everyone around you to see where they are and who they are. And that's all that's really needed for positive change, is for awareness to be increased. Energy flows where attention is directed. So if there is something that needs attention, it helps a lot if you're an attentive being around that person or that situation. But yeah, if we all sacrifice ourselves, we're all screwed. But if we all love ourselves, then we're all good. It's just that simple.
Question number 8. What is your greatest fear? How did you overcome it, if you have?
I don't know if I have overcome it, but, I think that for me in particular, there's sort of a program or fear. I think it has to do with like where my South Node sits in my astrological chart, but a fear of, being alone, being lonely is a big fear. And I think that drives a lot of people, especially in the last couple of years. So for me, a good way of addressing that fear with a better perspective is another kind of word magic trick, but it goes back to the idea of the pleroma or the oneness or the no thingness, in that alone is actually all one, right? So we're always alone if we're all one, in the sense that our life force energy, the electricity that animates our individuated vessels, is the same life force energy, it's the same ether that permeates all of existence, and it is existence itself. So we are always alone, but we're always all one. And so we're not really separate. There's no real separation. And then that can help release the pain or the fear or the grief of feeling lonely that the ego can get, especially in lockdown world as that happened. So that helped me a lot, is the realization that, because it can go both ways, actually. Getting closer and dipping your toes into the pleromic state of oneness is also scary, because it brings with it the fear that if you attain might not be the right word, but if you reach a level of perception of what, you might call the Godhead, of the supreme being, of this whole ascension idea, which is a sticky idea, and I'm not necessarily a proponent of ascension-based ideology or ascension cults, but there's this fear that comes about that if I, wake up from this dream of reality, then everything and everybody that I love will disappear with it. And I don't want to leave all that behind. So I want to stay right where I'm at and be in stasis. So collapsing the paradox in your own mind and recognizing that alone and all one are actually telling you the same thing means that you don't have to be afraid of either thing. That why would you need to be afraid of something that is the state you've always been in, always will be, and are currently in? So that helps alleviate the fear a little bit.
For real, another word trick. I love it. It's another one I've never thought of before either. The all breaking down the all, alone to all one. So super helpful. Thank you.
Yeah, it's helped me. Word magic is really great.
It's so easy. It's easy in, I don't know. It just seems, I don't know. It's hard. Okay. So it's easy and it's hard because it's right in front of your face, but you don't see it all the time, right? But when now every time that I think of this word alone, right, I'm going to be able to break it down and not have that. So, we just made a spell out of something, right? But it didn't exist before. And so that's why it's difficult, because we have to create these things, right?
Exactly. Aho.
Aho.
Yeah, that's just like an affirmative statement in native language.
Question number 9. What is your greatest driving force in life, and how do you further it?
I think the greatest driving force in my life is the recognition that we are here to create. I remember in my early 20s how I felt this kind of void within. I felt aimless. I felt almost lifeless, depressed and very unhealthy and out of shape. And it occurred to me at a certain point that maybe if I was creative, maybe if I was making stuff, almost didn't really matter what it was, that I would feel better, that I would feel less purposeless and aimless. And I got into creating art, doing big doodles with Sharpies. And I started making like hard enamel pins of different designs that I would sell to people at music festivals. And all that was really, really fulfilling, even though it was simple, even though it was, it wasn't high level art or anything. And a big change occurred in my life whenever I started making space in my daily life for something creative. And then, one thing leads to another, in the sense that if you are seeking to improve your aptitude, improve your skill, and generate more and more space in your life for the flow state of a creative pursuit, that health actually becomes an imperative. You'll hit a wall of what it is you're able to achieve, what it is you're able to conceive based on the state of your physical body and your energy body and all that entails health. So for me, whenever I let creativity and just the purpose driven life of creating, being a creator, take the wheel from me, then that led me and steered me to all kinds of other upgrades in my experience, in particular, the journey of continually improving my health in whatever ways I possibly could. So definitely the single greatest driving force in my life was, and still is, when I recognized and honored that I am a creator and that we're all creators, but in the latter being a big upgrade to the idea, because, eventually when I noticed and I became a lot healthier and happier and more fulfilled in life and felt more in alignment with synchronicity, and that my spirituality was blossoming because of the fact that I was spending time creating, that led me inevitably to want to spread that message that, to me, the real spiritual path that is common to all of us outside of dogma, mythology, ideology is creativity. That creativity can be your entire guidance system, your entire compass for a spiritual development in your life. It will lead you to the places that you need to go. It will lead you to the ideas that you need to grow. And that is still the biggest driving force. And how I further it, I think I already kind of touched on this, but it's through continuing to work on myself. If you have, for example, behavior patterns, addictions, things that take up a lot of your time, attention, or energy, then that takes away from what it is that you can funnel and channel into the vessel that it is that you're putting your creative energy into. And so furthering this driving force, expanding it, necessitates that we also let go of that which does not serve this higher purpose.
I love that you tied creativity to health, and then how imperative that is, because you can't create unless you're healthy, right?
Well, you can, but your expressions will be limited or distorted in the same ways that your health is. Like I've seen some very creative psychic vampires before, but the stuff that they make, the feelings that it generates in the person looking at the creation is fear or unease, aversion, all these different energies that the person that is in the pattern of psychic vampirism is constantly feeling. So yeah, I mean, we can and always do create our life as the number one masterpiece as artists, but the quality of our creations definitely is completely intrinsically tied to the quality of our energy, which is also what our health is about.
Well, I mean, it makes sense. If you have, better nutrition, B12, memory, like all these things seem to go along with that. And we are very blessed in a world to have the knowledge to be able to plug into those tools instead of just being, completely dependent on, the exact world around us. We've been able to kind of narrow it down. So yeah, it's everything. If your mind isn't right, you can't think right. And then you can't create.
Exactly. Yeah, the distortions in your mind and in your energy body will either totally inhibit you creating what you want to create, or at the very least, damage or alter the creation in some way that is not desirable to your original intent. Because I think that we all have, or at least begin with the intent to bring more goodness into the world and into our lives. And the further that we allow ourselves to be riddled with parasites and vampiric energy piercing into our field, the further away from that desire for goodness that we get, to the point where human beings can even convince themselves that they're not good. And then that is a dangerous place to be.
Question number 10. Who were or are your role models and why?
Well, there's a lot of role models in my life. The guy that's coming to mind, though, as my first answer is David Whitehead. He is a martial artist. He's a conspiracy, I guess you could call him conspiracy researcher. He does a show called Truth Warrior, and he's also a co-host with Michael Tessarion on the Unslaved podcast. I've had David on my own show, I think 3 times, and I've been on their Unslaved podcast quite a few times. And what I really admire about David is that very mentality we already talked about, the warrior mindset that applies to so much more above and beyond just combat and fighting. And he's very disciplined. He's succeeded in having a beautiful family, but also a career pursuing, truth as the truth warrior. I really admire that. I admired the dedication and drive to constantly know yourself better and to express the truth in whatever way is most in alignment with what you see it as, without any fear of changing your mind, nobody's perfect. I'm not trying to put David on a pedestal, but I definitely admire what he does. And there's so many more other role models that could probably come to mind, but I appreciate him because he's got the spirit of what I think it means to be a man, to be the representative of the yang and the divine masculine in the world.
I'll have to check out that podcast then. It's not on my list, so I'll add it.
Yeah, you can find David's work on Rockfin. That's probably the best place to go. A lot of the other more mainstream channels, I'm sure he's been completely nuked off of by now. In particular, he's got a really good series called The Cult of the Medics, which is a newer one, exploring the occult aspects of the medical mafia and how through their symbolism and through their behaviors and intentions, they mirror the oldest cults that we know of and are part of the same branching network that has always attempted to steer and direct and engineer humanity for their benefit and power differential. Maybe not like your boots on the ground doctors and nurses have any idea about this, but the overarching structure and how it got into place is all a result of this very same priestcraft sorcery, I would call it. Cult of the Medics, really amazing series.
Yeah, I was, just to tie it back into your answer to the last question about health. And I used to, And so I used to say, I was having a conversation with Ellie a few weeks ago or whatever, and we were saying that I was saying that it used to be that the game was to not only stay out of jail, right? It used to be just stay out of jail, right? Now we have to worry about not only staying out of jail, but staying out of these medical systems that are not there to further our wellness and well-being, right? So it's even more just like two sides that we got to pay attention to now. So I don't know why it just made me think of that, but yeah. Question number 11. What quality do you most admire in a woman?
Okay, so this is a good question. I was like, how am I going to answer that? But then as soon as you said it, it popped into mind perfectly. I mean, I admire a lot of things about women and the healthy expression of the feminine. But what I think, what I think really an important aspect of the feminine in our construct is that in a healthy dynamic between a man and a woman, and this goes both ways, to be sure, but in particular, a woman can really help a man see when his energy is off, can let him know when he's not coming correct to whatever situation or to her. And most importantly, that would apply to like, are you following your highest purpose right now? Is what you're doing, saying, acting out, or expressing, is that in alignment with your highest purpose? Is it healthy? Is it, courageous? Is it truthful? So this can devolve into the archetype of like, I don't know, what they call like nitpickiness, right? And or negativity, that the feminine as the yin, as the black part of the yin yang, we have culturally and through language associated negativity with bad, but really it's actually one side of the battery. It's important for the battery to grow. It's also the receptive aspect. It's really negativity in its correct placement in terms of a dynamic between masculine and feminine isn't so much about, making somebody feel bad for what they did wrong. It's more about, and I think this has to do with why the feminine has the cycles of, their moon time that leads them to, not all of them express this way, but sometimes, in one particular week of the cycle, they're more, negative, right? But I think the negative isn't there in nature to be destructive or harmful, other than maybe removing that which does not serve. The negativity aspect of this battery is about being realistic instead of, the masculine can kind of, and that we all have the masculine and feminine component in ourselves, but the masculine can sometimes be so overly idealistic that it becomes out of alignment with truth or with what was currently in reality, in the consensus shared reality. So I really appreciate in a quality in a woman that can let you know whenever you're off in some way, but not in a way that is purposefully trying to tear you down or make you feel bad. In fact, if you are in a relationship of any kind as a man out there, or actually this applies to women too. Really, these dynamics apply to both men and women because we both have the I'm and the om. But I'm specifically really talking about the feminine aspect of consciousness more than necessarily just women. But if in a relationship or friendship of any kind, if you can detect and feel that they're actually on purpose trying to make you feel shitty about something, or continually saying things in a way or expressing to you in a way that is intending to make you feel bad about what you did or how you are, that is a red flag. And though I think the best middle ground option and expression of this yin energy for the man's benefit and for the man's growth is when you can have your course corrected in a sense. You can have your attention redirected to become aware of somewhere that you're off balance or not not an alignment, without being made to feel like you're lacking or less or a failure for doing so, but in an encouraging way. Like, hey, did you realize that this is how you're acting right now? And you could do it like this. Here's another option. I really appreciate that in a woman. Does this all make sense?
Yeah, dude, it makes 100% sense. And being able to do that without making those corrections, without doing it in a judgmental way, in which the receiver of said, criticism won't feel attacked, right? So, which will allow us to make course corrections, right?
Yeah. That's exactly what it's there for. That's what the negative side of the battery is there for, to help bring us back into alignment with reality and truth, not to be corrosive or degradatory.
Yeah, dude, you laid it out, 100%. I agree. Very well said.
Yeah, I really admire that in a female.
Yeah, it's a great answer. Thank you. Question number 12. What is the most courageous thing you have ever done or seen in your life?
Oh, my answer what's coming to mind is what feels like the most courageous thing I've ever done. And it isn't going to seem like, superhero storming the beaches of Normandy, running face first into a hail of bullets type of courage. But for me, it really took a lot of time and effort and continual faith in myself and courage to make the transition from feeling like I needed to work at jobs that I didn't love or that felt not in alignment with my highest truth and calling in order to survive. So at the point when I was able to let that go and become a full-time doer of my own thing, that to me took a lot of courage and took a long time to build up that courage. And part of what helped me get there was realizing that universe actually wants you to follow your hell yes. It actually wants you to be in the flow state of your greatest excitement and most fun. Universe is experiencing itself through you. So if you are courageous enough to do that which feels best and is most exciting, universe is going to actually put a lot more energy into you as a vessel. It's going to pay more attention to you. It's going to experience more of itself through you. It's going to say, wow, this particular vessel of me, of universe, is really shiny, really fun. Let's send it more fun. Let's do more excitement. So another way of framing that is that when you do what is right, then unseen forces come to your aid. And when you set boundaries for yourself and in the world that no longer allow you to do that which feels like a compromise or that which is out of alignment with your greatest truth, the universe will also reorganize its own offerings to you to be in alignment with those boundaries, because you are it, you are universe. So at the point where you jump off the cliff into your entrepreneurial life or your spiritual path or calling, and you leave behind the childish things of being afraid that you have to follow the herd in order to get the resources you need to survive, that is super in alignment with the highest capital T truth of reality, which is that the external world is literally in your mind, and it is completely a reflection in it as within, so without manner of your personal energy. So in nature, before all this society and civilization construct was going on, how did human beings even sustain themselves in, this mythical hunter-gatherer state, if there ever even was such a time? But we know that hunter-gatherers do exist, so we'll just use them as an example without necessarily needing to place them in a particular evolutionary timeline that may or may not be accurate. What it is that beings in that particular configuration of life, they exist in nature. Nature provides for them. And when they need what they need, it shows up. Or they do the ritual or the rain dance, or they have a dream about where they're going to find the next big game that they need to bring down and provide food for their village, whatever the case may be. So whenever you take the leap of faith and you have the courage to follow what is right for you, and you trust in it, and you're not feeling like that fear of constriction of it. Things have to be a certain way in order for me to survive or be okay. You'll find that each opportunity that synchronistically presents itself to you, if you courageously take that opportunity, even if you don't know where the next opportunity will be, the next one will show up when it needs to, but not until you take the one that you've currently been offered. And it's not like if you miss an opportunity, then you're screwed and you fail. A better way of looking at it is, even if one passes you by, there will always be the next one. And the universe is wanting you to trust that that is what flow state is all about. You take this step, and you take that step. And it's like in the Indiana Jones movie, the one about the Holy Grail, where he's got to walk across the invisible bridge. You just keep putting one foot in front of the other. And you may not know what the next step is after that. But it's very much like art. In art, you may have an idea of what outcome you're directing yourself towards, right? But if you try to think it through in every step, every brushstroke, and conceptualize and hold in your mind the entire process of every single move you're going to make from start to finish for the canvas to be complete and to manifest the vision that you're holding in your mind for what you want it to be, you can't do that. You can't hold all those steps in your mind at once. And the universe doesn't want you to be that overloaded with needing to know every little detail about how things are going to play out. Instead, you look at it like the difference between a creative person and someone who believes that they are not creative is that the creative person just does shit, right? They look at the blank canvas, and where the belief of being uncreative, that individual sees the blank canvas and goes, I don't know what to do. The creative person, the one in touch with their imagination, they just make a choice. They start with one brushstroke, and then that leads them to the next brushstroke. It's just like the question thing. It's just like the dendrites thing. The difference between creative and uncreative is being decisive and not being afraid that you're going to make the wrong decision and ruin everything. And instead trusting that there is no wrong answer when it comes to the creative process. I mean, you may make a decision that in a future iteration of the creative process, because of a previous way things went, you're like, I'm not going to do it that way this time. I'm going to try this way. And that's great. That's learning. That's, you're spiritually evolving. But don't be afraid that you're going to screw up so much that you're going to fail and be ruined. And that definitely applies to taking the leap of faith out of the Babylon matrix and into the flow state of perpetual synchronicity, following your highest and greatest excitement and only allowing for the hell yes and saying no to anything else. I feel like I could say a lot more about this, but maybe I'll just hold it there.
Oh, it's great. I love, the whole taking a leap of faith and trusting in it. I like to say that I like to think of it as like, if we're the universe and the universe is us, then obviously we have our own back. So the universe is going to have our back. So there's really nothing to worry about in terms of, what does the process look like? How do I arrive from where I am now to where my creative goal lies, right, in the alternative space? So yeah, I thank you for your answer.
Well, and I too love that idea of seeing it as in a shiny thing, that the universe will fill the vessels that are making the effort. And to me, this is a beautiful as above, so below. I think of how mycelium will modulate and change which nutrients and water are given to which plants based on the environment, which is ultimately creating the world that we live in, that we are part of, that we can then use our creativity to affect this ecosystem, this balance around us. And if you take that steps further to think that there are other things out there that we may not understand, but are gunning and filling and, pushing us in directions that, maybe it is just, it's not necessarily, it's just being open and allowing yourself to expand into something else. Because if you don't allow that expansion, then the universe isn't going to do it. So yeah, that's a very, I love that frame of reference and viewpoint.
Yeah. I mean, it applies to if you're in the Babylon employment system and it's not what you really feel called to be doing. I mean, you could potentially have a job, if you will, working for somebody else, and it could be you following your greater purpose and your highest excitement. I'm not ruling that out, but just realize that if the belief is that you need this to survive and that it's tough out there to survive and you got to make compromises and self-limiting choices in order to get the resources you need to put food on the table, well, that's exactly how universe will provide for you. It will provide for you in that sort of constricted, limited, just barely enough way. But think about your life. You've always had enough. You're still alive right now. You've made it this far. Actually, I long ago applied this concept to, before I managed to, get out of other types of work that weren't my highest passion. Maybe this helped me get there, was I applied this idea to food. And I set a boundary for myself that I'm only going to eat clean. I'm only going to eat the organics, or at the very minimum, like non-GMO, if I don't have the option for organic. I'm going to stop going to restaurants, definitely not fast food. And this type of food can cost more potentially, but I set the baseline expectation of what food costs and what food is to this higher standard. And years later, here I am, still okay, still fine on money. It didn't ruin me. It didn't financially bankrupt me that I spent more on money. Whereas other people, the way they see food is just like putting gas in a tank, and the cheapest option will work because we just need to fill that tank. And that also programs universe and programs your own behavior to be able to accept that bare minimum lowest quality. And so, that's what you'll get, and that's what you'll give yourself. And how I look at it is, now that I've got this baseline expectation and knowledge of what it is that food costs if I'm going to be buying it from grocery stores, then everything, I always have enough for that. And then that's my baseline, if that makes sense. So I'm expanding from that as the setting the bar point, rather than in this limited bar setting point.
Well, the universe is gunning for your nutrition. So, that's the positive side that the energy is always going to flow to.
Definitely.
Question number 13. What does it mean to be a man in today's world?
I think it means a lot of stuff, but more than ever, I think to express the masculine aspect of our consciousness, to express the I'm right now in the world for men and women, but, maybe especially for men, I guess. It is about standing up for and speaking up for the truth and what is right. We've seen long enough, I think, for the entire history of humanity that we're aware of, but especially the last couple of years, that going along to get along, you're going to get more of what you allow and what has been given to you. So we need to not go along to get along. We need to, I guess, resist in a way, not resist in a combative sense, but just like, it can be done lovingly. For example, you got to put your face diaper on here. You can't come in. Well, what if you just don't go in then, if there's no way around that? Or what if you approach that situation like bring some humor to it, or, express to them that you can tell that this is a tricky and hard balancing beam to walk on, but express to the, the one that is trying to enforce the hive mind on you that, hey, I see that this is kind of a hassle for you to even try to enforce this on me. And, I'm not mad at you for this, but I'm not going to do it. And is there any way around this that we can both, exist within our necessary frameworks? And if not, then just don't do it. Like, don't go into that place if you have to. I think that's okay if you got to make an exception, like you really need to fly somewhere and there's no way around it. They're not going to let you on, whatever. But generally, if in as many places as we can do it, we speak up, we say what we know is right and true, and we don't shy away from that and hide from that out of fear of how we're going to be perceived, or fear of how society is going to restrict or limit us for not going along with their group collective narrative. The more that we can make those stands, the less of what we don't want and what doesn't serve us is going to be present in our reality. So I know it's a little different in different places for sure, and you don't need to beat yourself up for your ability to be perfect at this, but just as your general guiding principle, to stand up for and speak up for what you know is right and what you know is true is the way of the warrior in today's culture, because we're not going out and fighting wars anymore. Hopefully, theoretically, most of us as men, we're no longer in a modality of society where it's particularly necessary to defend our castle against the hordes of barbarians or what have you, but also to be ready for that too. It's better to be, as they say, a warrior in a garden than a gardener in a war. So, and this kind of goes along with the masculine feminine dynamic. I think, honestly, women, they don't want a violent man per se, but I think women are a little bit, at least, if not highly attracted innately to the idea that a man could be dangerous if he needed to be. So being too soft, too gentle, too passive, and allowing for things in the external world to steamroll right over you, and having, no physicality to your form, having no strength, having no drive to be stronger. I mean, I'm talking physically, but also in all levels, because getting yourself physically stronger applies to your whole energy system and body. Doing hard stuff, lifting heavy weights. I like to go rock climbing, for example, because, it's fun for one, but having something that's a pattern in my life and existence and all that, where I have to exert maximum effort at something to succeed. How many things are there in our lives anymore that require us to exert maximum effort? Very few, actually. So if you can find a channel and an outlet where you're required to exert maximum effort in order to succeed or progress, then you are activating your ability to try hard to exert maximum effort in other areas. So it's very important to have those, whether it's from lifting weights or other types of, athletic endeavors. I think very vital for the masculine to be to have created a body for themselves where if they needed to, if shit hit the fan, that they could trust that the situation was going to be okay because they are there. Whether that comes through martial arts, which I'd love to get into again, or just being physically fit enough that at the very least you're competent and could, do something hard if it needed to be done. All of that is important to being a man in today's world. And what seems to be the hard thing for a lot of people is to just stand up for what is true and what is right and what is correct and what is moral. And I do think that that requires maybe that we accept that there is a moral function to universe, that there is a type of moral or natural law. And if we are in this sort of subjective la land where there's no such thing as truth, then, everything's relative. It's true that all perspectives on truth are relative, but the what is and the all is what it is. I am what I am. So there is objective truth. There is moral law. There's moral truth that is intrinsic and baked into the universe because, just fuck around and find out, if you will, how you make other people feel, what you do to others. It happens back to you, sometimes threefold, sometimes sevenfold. And to me, that is the evidence and proof that morality is a function of universe. And why would that be? If we live in a cold, indifferent, mechanistic, materialist reality, then that doesn't make sense. But if we realize that we are universe and we are meaning generating beings, and that being itself is the generation of meaning, existence itself is what and where meaning comes from, in the sense that it's always expanding. Existence and life continues to grow and expand always as a function or an image or reflection of the greater totality of all that. Then it only makes sense that we also, if we are making meaning, if we have an intrinsic conscience and compass morally, then universe does too. And so following our version of that, listening to the still small voice within, recognizing how we made someone else feel through the function of empathy, and recognizing how we feel and having empathy for ourselves. All of these are necessary components to eventually, hopefully, spiritually ascend to the level of knowing yourself well enough to not transgress against what is innately true, correct, beautiful, and right. And there's a lot more we could say about that, but I think that's generally what the masculine's role is in InnerVerse, is to serve and defend and uphold that greater truth of reality, that we are indeed all connected, that the individual, the I'm, as opposed to just the Om, is also important, and that they're actually two parts of the same coin. And if we sacrifice the I'm in service to the Om, if we kill our individuality, if we slaughter our ego and join the Borg hive mind transhumanist agenda, well, the Om also suffers. The Om also degrades and loses the generative principle and becomes a lifeless thing, an uncreative thing, and ushers in the reign of cold, dead matter, as who was it that said that? Michael Hoffman called it that. And yeah, that's our job, is to guard at the gates of our own mind and of our own consciousness against that type of force that seeks to cannibalize our own individuality in service to a collective that can't even exist without the individuals within it.
That is very well said. You're a word wizard. I don't have anything to add to that. Adam, do you have any thoughts?
No. So well said.
Yeah. Well, did you want to plug anything that you have currently working on? Any projects in the irons in the fire, so to speak?
Oh yeah, I've always got a lot of those, but anyone listening can find more of my work at InnerVersePodcast.com. I do the weekly show InnerVerse, which is always deep, always good time. And also I have a weekly live show that's on YouTube and Rockfin. And I post it to my RSS feeds later, but it's most fun to check it out live with the video component and participate. It's called Vibe Rant. So there's usually 2 shows a week I'm doing of my own, but I'm on a lot of other shows too. And I try to keep everybody updated through my website, and my Telegram group is the best place to stay in touch with me and connect with the community of other InnerVersers, if you will. So my Telegram channel will be linked on the website as well under the chat tab, or just search for InnerVerse on Telegram. You'll probably find it. As well, you can get in touch with me for one-on-one client work. I do, as I alluded to, sound healing, and I use tuning forks, and it works remotely because we're all connected etherically. And I can assist with the strengthening and balancing of your energy field, and bringing awareness to places that are blockages in your energy field and how that pertains to mindset and trauma. And by bringing your attention to that, it can help your energy flow in new and expansive ways. I also do one-on-one work with clients using tarot cards and I Ching. So if you want like an oracle session with me where it constitutes spiritual counseling or guidance, if you will, but in the form of I'm presenting you with these cards and explaining their meaning, and then you are reflecting on that within and seeing how it connects to where you're currently at in your life. And those are very powerful and helpful as well. So love doing the one-on-ones with people. I've also been working on audiobooks as a narrator a little bit. I've only got one out that people can check out so far, but it's called Spirit World, July's End. And it's by Dylan Sicoscio, an amazing author, great etymological researcher and syncretist. And that book is extremely helpful for undoing the hex of heliocentrism and priestcraft sorcery that has been cast upon all of us by our, belief of the external savior and our sort of need for that in order to relinquish our personal responsibility for life. And it's time to take that back. It's time to reintegrate and internalize the light instead of externalizing the Most High, because we are all expressions of Supreme Being. We are all Supreme Being, and doesn't put one above the other. It just means that we need to take charge again of who and what we are in our place in the great web of existence that we could enjoy rather than, suffer through. So I do all those things and probably more, but InnerVersePodcast.com is where they can find my things, or if they want to get in touch with me for one-on-one client work, you can email me, chance@innerversepodcast.com, or find me on my Telegram group and get in touch that way.
Yeah, your Telegram. I'm in your Telegram group. I have been for a while, kind of lurking, but seems like a great community. Telegram is a cool, seems like a cool place to be from what I've experienced so far. So, yeah. And the tuning fork thing, I actually went to my sound healer earlier this week. I'd love to set up a session with you sometime, and maybe, I don't know if do you want to do it live? Maybe we can make a thing out of it. I don't know. That would be fun.
Yeah, let's do that. I'd love to do a session with you. I don't know if I want to do it live because it would be, these one-on-one situations, like it gets kind of personal. But I do have available on my website, if they find the shop tab and then go down to sound healing, there's a video on there from the beginning of the year where I did a group sound healing session that is free, and anybody can listen to that as many times as they want and receive the benefit of that, and maybe a little less specific to one's individuated configuration than doing a one-on-one. But I know for certain that the group session is definitely helpful for toning up anybody that wants to listen to it.
Awesome. Well, I'm going to check that out for sure. Yeah. Other than that, Adam, do you have any closing thoughts?
Yeah, nothing specific, but just overall in general, really just absolutely enjoyed the entire conversation. Just, I don't know, at least for me, just it kept speaking and wrapping back to that oneness, that as above, so below. At the end of the day, fear really is the thing that holds us back. And if we understood, like, it's not that it's a truth, but if the truth really was that, what's really important is the moment, and energy always goes on, and you're always part of the system in some way, in a way that you don't understand. But the fear is what prevents us from doing great things. If we knew that, but you can feel it and you can understand it, and if you can ride that, then your potential is just so much greater. And, like you said, the universe kind of fills you up.
Yeah, I love it, man. I'm really grateful for these 13 questions. I was a little intimidated by them when I saw the list. I was like, man, I don't know my answers to that, but here we are on the other side of it, and I feel like I know myself better. So thank you for the opportunity.
Awesome. Yeah, it's exactly what we like to hear. Awesome. Thank you for carving out some time to spend with us on a Saturday afternoon.
Especially on that word time, because it's the most valuable thing that you can give and offer and present somebody. It is a piece of your place here in time. So thank you so much for that.
Thank you, guys. I can't wait to share this with everybody.
Why is one man rich and another man poor? Why we ain't satisfied? Why we gotta have more? Why your suicide rates on the rest so high? Why I tell you the truth but you say don't lie? Why is being a good father at an all-time low? Why is it acceptable? Yo, why? I don't know. Why she blame him and he blame her? It's useless. Ask yourself this question. Why you making excuses? Why do parents gotta bury their kids? Why we text and drive, not caring how scary it is? Why it's so hard to forgive and leave the past behind? And if you did, then that's divine. Why don't you help your brother when you see him fall? Why do we act like God don't see it all? Why do we call them black, them white, them Asians, and use labels? Now that's racism. I don't wanna hold no. Why? 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 I don't wanna hold no. Why is there innocent people locked up for life, while some people can't say nothing nice? Why do we always gotta question question what all of it means and why won't you follow your dreams? Tell me why, that night when you took my dad, why'd you let me see my grandpa cry? And tell me why, and why do you choose to hide, even though you was born to fly? And tell me why, and why don't we turn from all the hate? And why don't we learn from all mistakes? Why do I keep on wrecking these fat beats? And teachers don't make more than professional athletes? And why, and why, and why, and why, and why, and why?
I don't wanna Hawaii. I don't wanna Hawaii. Why? I don't wanna Hawaii. I don't wanna Hawaii. Why? I don't wanna Hawaii. I don't wanna Hawaii. Why? I don't wanna Hawaii. I don't wanna Hawaii. Why?
This should be considered entertainment and not therapy. We hope you benefit from our resources available at 13questionspodcast.com. Thank you for listening.